I don't know. I don't know how you can sit in front of these kids sometimes and not have a tear in your eye. I've been called too emotional, but if that's what it is, I don't care. It's humanising our kids, and I think that's part of what I want to do in this commission.
Sue-Ann Hunter has had a long career, which started as a social worker and reached the heights as a commissioner for Victoria's Truth-Telling Commission, Yoorook. Now she's been appointed as Australia's first National Commissioner for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children and young people. And the weight of the responsibility is very real.
It's been called for a long time. And in saying that, can I just start by recognising those people that have come before us, our ancestors, our elders, but particularly those that have fought for our children, those from stolen generation, those that returned home, those that didn't.
Her appointment comes at a time when Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander adults are being imprisoned at one of the highest rates in the world. Incarceration rates are rising instead of falling. Indigenous people make up nearly a third of all deaths in custody, and most closing the gap targets for children are not on track, with some going backwards. So the task to break the cycle that leads to these appalling stats is a huge one.
So when I walked in, it's huge, right? My first job is to set the foundations, a solid foundation, so that this commission won't fall over years down the track.
I'm Daniel James, and you're listening to 7am. Today, National Commissioner for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children and young people, Sue-Ann Hunter, on the task ahead and giving voice to children who have too often been spoken about but rarely listened to. It's Friday, February 20. In terms of the issues that are confronting Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children, what's the priority there for you in terms of, now that you're established, what do you want to tackle first?
One of the things we sort of have underway is we are commissioning a piece of work at this point around all the big commissions, inquiries that have already been done. You know, and I know there's 100 recommendations. There's hundreds of recommendations to the shelf.
The Human Rights Commission has now published its report. It's called Bringing Them Home. It's a profoundly moving, deeply disturbing document.
Most of the recommendations put forward by the Bringing Them Home report have either never been or inadequately implemented.
With the report of the Royal Commission to Aboriginal Deaths in Custody, which showed with devastating clarity that the past lives on in inequality, racism and injustice.
20 years ago, the Royal Commission into Aboriginal Deaths in Custody delivered its final report. 2 decades on, Indigenous incarceration rates remain high and Indigenous deaths in custody are still happening.
And I think we'll start with the Bringing Them Home report in out-of-home care and move forward from there. We'll also look at deaths in custody, how does that affect children, all those reports. That will set a blueprint. I don't want to come out all guns a-blazing doing another report that nobody's going to look at. The other thing that we've started putting our minds to is data. Data is collected differently in states, territories and jurisdictions around the place, particularly on our kids, and it's done differently because there's different laws in every state. So collecting the data nationally to get a really good, solid understanding of where our kids are at in out-of-home care, in youth justice, in health, in education. Data tells a story. We really need that. But also setting up a framework of youth, of going out and consulting, and I hate the word consulting, but, yarning with youth about their views and what they want to see in, and getting their views even into a lot of how we're setting this up. That's not really tackling the big issues to start with, but it's setting a really big foundation, a solid foundation that this commission can be built off.
This role has been written into law. What powers have you been given, and how are they different from what existed before, if there was anything before?
This is the first time our kids are in there, in a Commonwealth law. So we sit under like a Public Service Act at the moment. That will then give us the independence that we need. So we're free of political interference, actually anybody's interference. It's big, it's a big responsibility. That means we can motion our own inquiries. That means we can compel documents. That means we can ask people to come before us and give us, answer our questions. It also means that we can speak directly to governments about what's working and what's not working. Now, we all know recommendations and, reports don't always get picked up. I get that. I've just been on the Yoorook Justice Commission, and if you look at, once we get this commission piece of work, we'll see how many are taken up. But it also gives me an in to understand the issues of why and really work about getting them. I'm going to be persistent and continuous, and I'm going to be really selective in recommendations. But I'll also run that past the kids because it's them. This is for them. This is what they want to see. I think one of the things I've always thought about, Daniel, is the gap between policy and on the ground delivery. There's this big gap. I want to get in at the policy level, and I've been talking to people already, people in Parliament across the board saying, if you have something you want to get through and it includes our children, let us know early. Don't just be an add-on. We will break that down and take it out to our kids and say, hey, this is what they're looking at. What does that mean for you? What does that look like? And then be able to give them some advice about what that looks like on the ground, what the kids are saying, and get better outcomes for our kids through their voices.
What powers haven't you been given that you would have liked to have had?
We've had a bit of argy-bargy about quite a few, but I will say I come in a bit cynical. I didn't think we'd get much. We have more than I actually thought we'd get, so I'm really grateful for that. The rights to entry, we don't have, Dorndale or Banksia Hill, those places.
The image you've just seen isn't from Guantanamo Bay or Abu Ghraib, but Australia in 2015. A boy, hooded, shackled, strapped to a chair and left alone. It is barbaric. This is juvenile justice in the Northern Territory.
What we need to remember is in most jurisdictions there's a commissioner for children, or there's also, maybe not everywhere, but there's a commissioner for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children as well. They know their own backyard. They know what's going on in their own state, and I will be guided by them. Whether I'm the backup dancer in something is fine, or whether they want me to be the front person in that, we'll work that out as we go along.
As you've alluded to throughout our conversation so far, Sue-Ann, many of the biggest levers sit with states and territories. So what can a national commissioner realistically shift? I
think I'm just going to be like a little terrier, and I'm constantly going to be at their door, knocking, and have those ins and make those relationships. There's power in numbers. We need to remember that. But I think if we come with the voices and stories, you can't dismiss the voices and stories of our youth. I don't know about you, Daniel, but when you sit with our young ones and you listen, the adversity they've been through to where they are now, you can't deny that. Can I just tell you, I've already got all these inboxes from kids because I've invited them, contact us, let us know. Tell us your story, because the kids that are doing well and have gone through the adversity have these amazing stories. So one, I want to highlight the good stuff. I met a young girl and she was homeless, no job, and she was actually meeting with Minister Plebiscite. And then I saw her after the bill had been read. She's like, Auntie, and chased me down the hall, and she's gave me the biggest hug and she was crying and said, oh, it makes me emotional. This is amazing for our people. And I said, you need to we're going to catch up. And I said, I need your story out there. And she said, I've come from nothing. And she's not even 18. I've come from nothing. They're the stories that need to be in front. They humanise our kids, because they're dehumanised all the time.
Coming up, what's most broken about the system? Let's talk a bit about you, Sue-Ann. What made you want to take up this position as a National Commissioner for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children in the first instance?
I think the work I've done as a social worker on the ground with our kids, and I carry hundreds of stories. I've sat with our kids in hospitals, and I've sat with them in youth detention, sat with them in classrooms and homes, and, little did I know then as a little social worker where I'd end up. But I learned more off those kids than I have ever in a classroom doing, my social work degree. I do it for them. That's why, and it really drives me. I'm an auntie and a mum as well. Our kids deserve better. They just do. It's all been with and for our next generation. It's just such an honour, but it's huge, like the enormity of it. I have to chunk it down and break it down, otherwise it would just be too overwhelming. But everyone's willing to help. Everyone wants to chip in, and I love that.
You've worked with Aboriginal children for a long time now, in all sorts of different levels. Over the years, what have you seen? What's most broken about the way we deal with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander kids in a systemic sense and in a societal sense? Yeah,
I was thinking about this the other day. We were talking about different things in sort of out-of-home care and stuff. Kids always go home, right? And whether they run from out-of-home care or what have you, they always go home. We need to support the family as a whole. Sometimes kids need to be removed. Let's be really clear. It's about the safety and the rights of the child, and the rights of the child are at the forefront for me, and the safety and well-being. Sometimes kids have to be removed, and then they always want to go home. Why aren't we working with families? It's a whole family. We strengthen the family as well as the child. And then in doing that, we're also strengthening the community. It costs more to lock a child out than it would be to put that into a family, a whole family and a child. There's more focus on policy. We lose that this is human beings. They're not statistics. They're children. They're families.
You've seen firsthand that education has a big role to play in helping address the problems facing First Nations children and young people. So what do you want all Australians to know that they perhaps don't know right now?
I want people to understand that our children are strong, they're smart, they need opportunities, and we can grow that by not doing the public narrative of they're all criminals. And they're not demonised, and we have this horrific public narrative about Aboriginal youth at this point. And so I want them to know that our kids are smart and strong. They come from the oldest living culture in this world, that they carry in them, that they need opportunities, that we need to support them, that we need to build them up as a society because we've teared them down for too long. That's what I want Australia to know.
Finally, Sue-Ann, recently the government handed down its latest Closing the Gap report, and most targets aren't on track and several are even going backwards.
Mr. Speaker, we are now 5 years away from most of the target deadlines. We are clear about where there is more to do. We must also guard against talk of failure, because talk of failure dismisses the aspirations and achievements of Indigenous Australians. It ignores the leaders.
Why is that in your view, and can we ever turn that around?
I think we can turn it around. I really do. So what Closing the Gap does is give us the data, and tells us this isn't working. What I can do in this role is look at the accountability. Why isn't it working? Where is government investing? Where are they missing out? Who's not doing what? And hold them, have the accountability. I can call that out. I can call out those pieces. I can ask for those documents. I can have a look at where the gaps are and call that out. Like, you can't say it's great because it's not, particularly for our kids, particularly for our future. And I'm looking forward to that part of it. I think the accountability part is what I'm really looking forward to. And we need to call people out. And I will say, whether that's us, everybody's held accountable, right? And I need to be held accountable, and that's why I'll be at Senate estimates all the time. And then the community will call me out. But I have an accountability mechanism, and so does everybody else that deals with our kids. And so we all are accountable. We all can shape the future of our kids, but we all need to work together on getting this done.
Commissioner Hunter, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me.
Also in the news, a new report has found that in 2028, federal, state and territory government gross debt as a share of the economy will exceed levels not seen since World War II. Analysis by the E61 Institute says Australia will cease to be a low-debt country and be more vulnerable in a future crisis without a combination of spending cuts and tax reform. Government spending has been in the spotlight since the Reserve Bank's recent interest rate hike. And one adult among the group of 34 Australian women and children in a Syrian detention camp has been issued with a temporary exclusion order, banning them from coming to Australia for up to 2 years. It follows attempts from the group to flee the camp to Australia before being turned back by Syrian authorities. The rest of the group has not been assessed by intelligence agencies as meeting the threshold to be banned from Australia, but the Albanese government maintains it will not assist in repatriating them. I'm Daniel James, you've been listening to 7am. We'll be back tomorrow.